His condition deteriorated, and during the night, he was so sick, Jill was jolted awake by a heavy thud. James had fallen out of bed and he was writhing on the floor, gasping for breath. He was showing signs of viral meningitis. Please, God, she prayed, don't let him die. And she ran for neighbors, and they managed to get him into a makeshift stretcher, into a boat, and across the river, and into a waiting ambulance. And day after day passed, and James grew worse. His fever and his suffering increased, and one long day passed after another. Each moment was prolonged agony for Jill. Her emotions flew across the gamut. She was in a foreign hospital with an apparently dying husband, and she wanted to know how long before he turned the corner and started to improve, or if he would. You know, it's hard to be in an extended crisis, isn't it? We know that now after 14 weeks of what we've been experiencing. One long day after the next is filled with moments of stress and anxiety and anger and sadness and hope, sometimes hopelessness. It's a toxic brew of bubbling emotions that eat us alive from the inside out. But I'm glad to tell you that James did turn the corner, and he was able to return to England for a full recovery. But it was an event the family will never forget. Later, James and Jill wrote their story for a book. The book is called When the Roof Caves In. And their section of the book is, Where's God When It Hurts? And their final answer was, He's with us when it hurts too. And sometime in every life, in your life and in mine, we find ourselves in a dark tunnel where no light seems visible. You weep and you cry, you're frustrated and you plead, Lord, I can't take it anymore. I have no more patience and no more strength to hold out. I've got to hear from you today. Most of us have been there. What about you? It may have been because of a long, drawn-out sickness. Might have been because of a long-term financial problem. Maybe you've had a struggle with grief, or maybe you've been an alcoholic spouse or an unsaved loved one, or dysfunction is going on in your family. Or perhaps you're suffering through a problem at work, a demanding, unreasonable boss, or a jealous, spiteful fellow worker whom you have to cope with every single day with no resolution in sight. And before you know it, you find yourself in David's shoes, and you can understand his heartfelt words and emotions. This man is a hero. He's a man of God, the favorite son and sweet singer of Israel. David is a man after God's own heart, and yet he's a man of anguish and suffering. He's a man given to the depths of depression, and he cries out to God with these words, how long? Let me fill in some of the background. David's boyhood had been one of a shepherd boy, just one of several sons in a large family. What a fateful turn of life had taken. From the moment David killed the giant Goliath, he himself became a hunted man. One moment he was the toast of the nation, and the next he was a young man hiding out in caves. The king, the insecure and temperamental Saul, was bitterly jealous. You see, Saul's stock had plummeted as that of the shepherd boy had skyrocketed. The women of Israel celebrated the victory of David over Goliath by singing a song that is recorded for us in 1 Samuel 18:7. Here's the song. Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. That was an intolerable situation for an egotistical monarch, and Saul began to eye David from that day forward. You see, we often forget that David was a fugitive for 8 or 9 years. We forget that he lived a life on the run in the very country where he was a national hero. Furthermore, his life and his plight were complicated by all kinds of personal entanglements. Get this, Saul, David's enemy, the same ruthless king whose life was dedicated to hunting David down and murdering him, Saul was also the father of a son who was David's best friend and a daughter who had stolen David's heart. Can you imagine a more complicated personal scenario than that? There was a time when David had the protection of 600 of his faithful men. He settled in a place called Ziklag, where he managed to live peaceably for 16 months. But one day, he left on a military mission, and when he returned home, the city of Ziklag had been burned to the ground. All the wives and the children whom the soldiers had left behind were carried away, including David's own family. David's men were not merely grief-stricken, they were filled with fury, and they turned their anger on David, and they threatened to stone him to death. It was all David's fault. That's the way they saw it. As far as they were concerned, David, their leader, had cost them their wives and their children. 1 Samuel 30 tells of David's deep distress. He'd lost his own family. He was blamed for the loss of hundreds of other women and children. And now he faced death by stoning. Out of his pain, in his heart, he cried out to the Lord. And out of that furnace of his desperation came the incredible words of Psalm 13. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long will my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Enlighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death, lest my enemy say I have prevailed against him, lest those who trouble me rejoice when I am removed. But I have trusted in your mercy. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. David wrote this psalm when he was physically exhausted. He was emotionally depressed. His troubles with King Saul had gone on year after year, and he was discouraged. And this psalm was wrung out of the extremity of his soul. He simply could not go on. As we examine this psalm, we learn some things about ourselves from David. First of all, we discovered that our struggle happens when God delays. On those occasions when you struggle with God's timing, it's good to know these feelings didn't originate with you. Not only did David express the feelings you've had, he did so repeatedly. If you read through the Psalms, you'll find a number of Psalms like the one we're exploring in this message. Just as a song has a refrain, this psalm has one, a recurring phrase that always comes back around. This time the chorus or refrain is repeated 4 times. Here it is. How long? Aren't you grateful for the Psalms that are such remarkable illustrations of honest prayer? I mean, I don't always pray with total honesty. You may not either. You force a smile into your prayers and you say, I couldn't be better, Lord. But God knows what you're going through, and he has been looking forward to talking it over with you, and he'd be much happier with an exasperated how long than with your forced smile. When God delays, sometimes we feel forgotten. Psalm 13:1 says, how long, O Lord, will you forget me? Forever? You come to a point sometimes of believing that God has forgotten you. Don't worry. It's a common experience. We all go through it one time or another, feeling that God isn't there, or at the very least, he's forgotten us. Perhaps our problems aren't important to him, we imagine. The psalmist encounters those very doubts in Psalm chapter 10 and verse 1. Here's what he says there. Why do you stand afar off, O Lord? Why do you hide in times of trouble? You see, everyone has a point somewhere in the geography of their souls marking the limits of their faith. It is the point at which faith begins to unravel. Only we ourselves know where the point lies, and we find out during a season of testing. A trial will build to a crescendo in your life. You attempt to handle it and you pray about it, but life will not cooperate. And as the days turn to weeks, and then weeks to months, and months even to years, you reach that personal point somewhere in the scheme of your suffering when you begin to give up on God. What you believe is that he has given up on you. You may even be feeling that way right now as you watch this message. If so, please allow me to remind you that what you're contemplating is a simple impossibility. God never gives up on you. He never ceases to care about you, and he will not abandon his work on you, of which your trial is a part. I love the poignant word